I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Friday. Finally, Dennis and I are approaching a time when we can see the sun. It actually got above freezing here in Colorado for the first time since Monday at about 5 o'clock. Did that about 11 a.m. this morning. So even though we got 3 or 4 more inches of snow, the sun came out. It started to feel a little bit warmer. It's gotten me a little bit more excited and happy and peppy.
Well, we're about a day or so behind you. So we breached 27 as our high today. So I'm looking forward to getting that, breaking the freezing barrier tomorrow. Hopefully we get some sunshine. It was pretty gray. Even had some flurries this afternoon, early evening, but I don't know, man. It just feels like we're a week away from the combine, 10 days. And, that's exciting. We're talking dynasty rankings. The draft is right around the corner. It's dynasty startup season is, if you're a degenerate, it's probably already in full swing. I've got one Empire reset that I'm still waiting for a good opportunity to do the draft order. I missed the Daytona 500, and I don't know that I want to wait all the way till March Madness because I'd like to get going, but who knows? We'll see what happens.
I mean, there's auto randomizers out there too that are kind of.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll do some Kentucky Derby kind of shit, and
Kentucky Derby, you'd be waiting even longer.
Well, no, I mean like the style Kentucky Derby where you have some random, event and everybody's picks a,
what you could do that would be incredibly random that's coming up is ESPN has an Oscar pool. You make your Oscar rankings, and that is Sunday, March 2nd. So that is actually not a bad option. That's next Sunday. It's a week from Sunday. That's an easy way. And, that's often quite random. Even if you know movies or have seen them all like me, it's still quite random.
Yeah, that may work.
Yeah, gives you something anyway. Well, we are going to dive into running back rankings. We finished up QBs the last 2 episodes, so you can be sure to check those out. We are going to spend 3 episodes going through running back rankings, 25 at a time. So it would be 75 to 51 today. Let's just say these are maybe some wish stream guys or maybe some guys that you just have rostered now until post rookie drafts. These would probably, I know for me, there's quite a few in this range that might be cuts, especially after we see how the NFL draft and free agency shake out. But first, only a little bit of news going on. They did announce that the Chargers are going to be the ones to host the game in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Who would you most like to see them play down there?
I guess the Ravens. Let's have a Harbaugh Bowl in Brazil. Because the Chargers, honestly, it doesn't feel like they have a heated rival. Yeah, they've got division foes, but it isn't like, the Browns and the Bengals or the Browns and the Steelers. It's not like the Eagles, Cowboys. When I think rivalries, I don't think Chargers and anybody.
So I have some bad news for you.
Yeah,
They aren't playing the Ravens this year.
yeah.
So they're the home team. So the options, I guess I should have looked this up because I started thinking, what are the options? The options are the Chiefs, the Broncos, the Raiders, the Texans, the Colts. They have a home game against the Eagles this year, but that certainly won't be the Sao Paulo game because that's going to be the Eagles will be playing at home on Thursday night. The Washington Commanders, Pittsburgh Steelers, and Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to lean toward Commanders out of that group.
I think of who I would like to see. I think the Commanders are pretty reasonable. I feel, though, like it's probably going to be the Raiders.
That would suck so much, as somebody that endured those second half of the opening weekend Monday night double headers of Raiders Chargers for so many years, kicking off at like 8:30 p.m. here. That does not get the blood pumping. I guess potentially they'd have Russell Wilson. They have Pete Carroll now. Pete Carroll against Jim Harbaugh. From an NFL standpoint, they might be thinking that that's interesting because they had some college rivalries. But
weren't they when Carroll was at Seattle and Harbaugh in San Fran? Didn't they? Aren't they in the same division?
I guess they were. Yeah, and I guess they did have some playoff ones because weren't there some that was Legion of Boom era?
Yeah.
I know. I'm still not sold. We'll see how the offseason goes, but at this point in time, I'm not sold the Raiders are going to be good. And I think the Chargers.
I'm not sold they're going to be good. No.
Oh, yeah.
You should see my Raiders running back rankings.
Yeah. Well, they don't have. They probably don't have their starting running back on the roster right now. Brandon Staley going to the Saints to be a defensive coordinator. He'll be working for Kellen Moore. Last time we saw he and Kellen Moore paired together, Staley was the head coach. Moore was the offensive coordinator for the Chargers. Do you think it's a good move?
I think so because Staley has spent most of his career on the defensive side of the ball. And he came to the NFL in 2017. So he's been there now for 8 years, 9 years. He's been in the NFL. Prior to that in college, though, he was almost exclusively a defensive coordinator. But he was only a defensive coordinator for 1 year in the NFL before he got the Chargers job. That year, the Rams had the number 1 overall defense, the number 1 defense versus the pass, and the number 3 defense versus the run. Now, before we get too worked up about Brandon Staley being a defensive genius, let's not forget he had some dude named Aaron Donald, which makes defenses a whole lot better.
Well, they also never had a very good defense when he was with the Chargers, even though I'm pretty sure he was the defensive coordinator there too.
So, he was listed as the head coach, and I'm sure he stuck his nose in
the defensive play caller anyway. Guess.
Yeah, but he didn't have Aaron Donald. So, now
he had Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack.
I think it's gonna. I think it'll be fine. Is he Vic Fangio or who's the other really hot old defensive coordinator that's in the league now?
Spagnuolo.
Somebody else that recently changed. I feel like he was a Chargers head coach at some point, or not Chargers, Broncos. But that's probably Fangio. I don't think Vance Joseph. I think he's been pretty good as a defensive coordinator.
He is the Broncos defensive coordinator now.
So, to me, I think New Orleans has all kinds of cap issues still. Is the front office, because they didn't change in the front office, they just changed coaches. Is the front office going to change their philosophy and bite the bullet and reset the cap, or are they going to keep seeing how far down the road they can kick it and try to fill in piecemeal cheap veterans and rookies and hope that you hit on some? It's a tough spot to be in. I think his, Staley's experience as a head coach is going to help Kellen more. It'll just come down to, you typically, when you get your first head coaching job and you're taking over a team that needs a head coach, it's not because the team just won the Super Bowl and is stacked with great players. It's like taking over a dynasty orphan. It usually doesn't have any draft picks and everybody on the team is old. So that's, there's no salary cap in New Orleans and everybody on the team is old.
We haven't talked about Justin Tucker in a little bit. A lot of more allegations have come out. I think the number is up to 16 or 17, which is approaching Deshaun Watson territory. The announcement is the NFL is investigating. Do you think he will get released here soon?
Well, what I want to know is what's J.D. Vance think? Is he like, why can't guys just be guys anymore? Why are they always persecuted? No, I think he's going to get released. Will Cleveland sign him when he gets released to a guaranteed contract for more money than any other kicker? Hopefully they learn their lesson, and the answer is no.
I don't think anyone will sign him right away. I think people are going to want to know what the NFL decides as a punishment. But this got to be a weird, grim situation.
Yeah, it's almost like, unless you're like absolutely 100% innocent and you can prove it, which how do you prove it if it's just you and a girl in a massage room and then it now becomes your word against hers? Hopefully they didn't Bill Clinton the dress there and keep a DNA towel.
Well, and this supposedly has been going on for a few years, and
I saw a tweet the other day that said, all this time the Deshaun Watson thing was going on, Justin Tucker's just sitting up there in Baltimore thinking he's cool.
Well, I mean, that is true. It allegedly, based on what's going on, he was doing the same thing at the same time. Yep. So,
did Tucker go to Clemson?
They don't usually make a big deal about where field goal kickers. He went to Texas.
Okay.
So, it is interesting. Like one of the things I was just looking up his thing, and one of the things it says he's known for is being a devout Catholic who does the sign of the cross before every kick. Person Butker,
but you don't see the other hand behind his back with his fingers crossed. That's the part we keep missing.
Well, let's go ahead and dive into running backs. We are starting 75 to 51. We'll talk about a few questions, but Dennis, why don't you kick us off? Go 75 to 61. Do your first chunk.
All right. So, if people were listening to us in pre-show, which, God, I hope they weren't. I mentioned my wild rankings for the Raiders running back room. I'm not even sure everybody in that room is signed, but I got Dylan Lobby at 75. Rookie, didn't get a lot of playing time, but I think it's going to have as good a shot as anybody, depending on who they bring in and draft in free agency, to be able to carve out a role, maybe as a receiver. But I don't know. You have to do something. Amir Abdullah at 74, another Raider. He showed himself to be a very good pass catching back still, and he may still be able to carve out that role. But Pete Carroll has ideas about the run game, and it typically doesn't involve 5'10", 190-pound receiving backs. 73, I got Kenny McIntosh. When Seattle had injuries this year, McIntosh finally started to show some of the buzz that he was getting coming out of college about being a good receiving back, and ran the ball really well also. I think he's a guy that's going to need injury in front of him to be relevant. They're very, very heavy on Kenneth Walker and then Zach Charbonnet. But I think McIntosh earned the third RB role there in Seattle, and I think they'll have confidence in him should they have to play him. At number 72, my highest ranked Raider, Sincere McCormick. I don't know. I mean, actually, maybe not. Is Madison still there? I think he's above them. I can't.
Madison was on a 1-year deal. Zamir White's still there. I'm pretty sure Amir Abdullah is a free agent as well. And Dylan Lobby, I don't know.
Yeah. So I got Sincere McCormick. He's going to show up later in one of the questions you've asked that we'll be answering. I think McCormick showed pretty well when he got a shot. I just don't think that he's a special back. He isn't a guy that's going to come in and take over a backfield. But often when Jags get volume, they can be productive for fantasy. 71, I got Marshawn Lloyd. Was snake bit all year last year. Pretty highly regarded rookie coming into the league. But injuries essentially dropped him behind Chris Brooks and was it Patrick? No, not Patrick Taylor. Somebody else there in Green Bay.
Emmanuel Wilson.
When they needed to do something that wasn't Josh Jacobs getting 60 carries a game. So Lloyd, he could be a guy that takes a big step second year, maybe takes over, moves up to RB3, maybe even RB2, depending on how he handles the offseason and preseason and whether or not he stays healthy. Number 70, I got Kamani Vidal. He's another guy that could, I think, carve out a role in Los Angeles. His first game, he had a big pass catch for 40 or 50 yards, never really established himself in that, rotation they have there with juggling whoever wasn't injured on any given week for the Chargers. 69 is Kenneth Gainwell. There's a series of veterans coming up through here that I have here. They could end up in the next group, or they could stay down here. It feels like some of them may not get signed until somebody has an injury. They could get signed as veteran insurance and be inactive. Kenneth Gainwell is one of those guys. I know he was the direct backup to Barkley. I'm not sure how much they're going to invest. I think he was a free agent, and I'm not sure Philly really is going to invest a lot to bring him back, especially after seeing Will Shipley pop off a 70-yarder and kind of show some good stuff at the end of the season. 68, I got Miles Sanders, another veteran. Usually takes him about 3 years to get settled in a new offense. So that's where we are. When he came back from injury last year, he looked okay, but Chuba Hubbard essentially grabbed hold of that job and didn't let it go. We'll see what happens there. 67, Samaje Perine, a versatile pass-catching back, good pass blocker, not overly athletic or explosive. 66, Jeremy McNichols, another guy. He carved out a niche in Washington, but a lot of that happened because of injuries to Eckler and injuries to Brian Robinson. So he's likely back at no higher. I don't know if Eckler will still be there, but I still think that McNichols won't be any higher than the third running back in Washington if he's still there. 65, one of my favorites. Really hurts to have him this low, but he's a free agent. He's 20. What did I put over here? He's just turned 29 years old, coming off his second major injury. It's Nick Chubb. Cleveland said they'd like to have him back. He wants to be back. But, there's part of me, there's one side of me that says, look, he's 29 years old, coming off another major injury. What's he got left in the tank? And the other side of me that's like, man, that's Nick fucking Chubb. What are you talking about? The dude's a robot. He's a beast. He's an animal. He works harder than anybody when it comes to conditioning and getting himself right. So I don't know what's going to happen with Chubb. I suspect Cleveland might offer to bring him back. They're probably going to pay him more than somebody else because they have because of loyalty. But Jerome Ford has looked good. They've had other backs come in there and play well. I like Chubb, but, we'll see what happens. 64, the aforementioned Will Shipley. He was his freshman year in college. He was going to be the next big thing. And, it turned out to be his peak year in college. He's a good back. He's a real good pass catching back. Runs the ball pretty well, but he's a little bit light. Could use, I don't know if he bulks up, how much is effectiveness going to get taken away. But, in college, he was good and he did some good things. I think he's a guy that can carve out a role as a pass catching type of back. He also is very effective in the return game. 63, Isaiah Davis. So he showed off in New York last year. Braylon Allen did as well. Well, Breece Hall struggled a little bit coming back from the injury. Well, that injury now is going to be a year plus gone. And so I expect Breece Hall to, ride the lightning again, get back in there and control that job in New York. I think Davis will be the 3. Braylon Allen will be the 2. And kind of like San Francisco does, these guys are all very similar, have very similar skills. So when they go in, nothing really changes about the offense. That being said, the offense is new this year, so we're going to have to see. 62, Kendre Miller, another training table guy. Had some good seasons in college, but never had any great seasons in college. Seems to have some pretty good skills, but still hasn't been able to just put together a consistent season of health and monster production. 61, Sean Tucker. I'd love to see Sean Tucker get moved. We were talking about Liam Cohen a few shows ago, and I felt like Sean Tucker's a guy I'd like to see him trade for.
They will, based on how that relationship ended, I don't think they'd give him a warm cup of piss right now.
Yeah.
In Tampa Bay. Well, I mean, They blocked all of his requests to talk to any people he coached with. They've had very negative. I think they'd literally trade Sean Tucker to any other team, even if they were considering it. I still think Rachaad White is more likely to get moved because he's a contract year and probably could net them something of a better return.
So, but that's my 75 through 61.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I've, rarely have you seen a breakup as complex and as poor as Liam Cohen and the Buccaneers, especially since it's not like he was there for decades, giving them loyalty. And I think just the way he handled his departure and kind of semi-ghosting them, they've been seemingly really against. So I think that ruins your Sean Tucker potential. For me, I mentioned there are a ton of guys in this first group, especially the first of the few that are probably going to drop out of my rankings once we're post draft. A couple of them may move higher depending on how free agency shakes out. But just I don't think running back is an incredible position right now, even as we go through, even when we go to next Tuesday's show and we're looking at 50 to 26, there are some questions for me. So there are a lot of questions down in this lower range. So first for me, I have Craig Reynolds, I think he's just a guy that's just a workmanlike kind of back, so I have him in there. Sincere McCormick, I have at 74. He was probably the most impressive of the Raiders backs, and I use that word very loosely. I could see him continuing to have a role with Pete Carroll, but I think they're going to kind of start over. I have Alexander Madison at 73. Again, I don't think he was very good last year. I don't think he was very good the year before with Minnesota, but he feels like one of those guys that's going to continuously catch on to teams for a while and find his way on the field. 72 for me, Jamal Williams. I couldn't bring myself to drop him completely out of the top 75, but I don't think anyone has disappeared faster than Williams did after that last season in Detroit, where he looked incredible. We thought he was kind of the even and odd year guy. So we thought, well, maybe, being an even year, but
now he's at that age where he's 1 year, 2 years off, 1 year, 2 years off.
Maybe they're all odd years for Jamal Williams from here on out. I have Carson Steele at 71. Boy, was he a fun story for 2 or 3 weeks. I think the Chiefs.
Do he owns an alligator?
The Chiefs are another team that I think are going to blow up their running back room this offseason, which is probably not going to be great for Carson Steele. I have Amari DeMarcado at 70. He's still hanging on, still sees snaps in the field in Arizona. Only God knows what Arizona's offensive philosophy is, because it's unclear from week to week watching them. Number 69, I have Kareem Hunt.
Nice.
He looked really good when they brought him into Kansas City for a while. Really good. He looked better than I expected when they brought him into Kansas City, but he's kind of at that age where if he never played another snap, that wouldn't totally surprise me either. So we'll see what opportunities are out there for him. I have Zamir White at 68. He didn't look good last year, but the year before, he looked really good in relief. He's still a young back. They're changing systems again. He is kind of a pounder. He's still under his rookie contract there. I expect him to stay with the Raiders. We'll see if he can work himself onto the field. 67, Keaton Mitchell.
Lindsay's nickname for you? Kind of the pounder?
God. Good thing. We're earning our parental advisory for this episode. Keaton Mitchell, we saw some flash as a rookie. I don't think he saw a single snap last year. He was coming back from injury. We knew it would be a while, but no impact. I still hold out some hope. It's hard because Derrick Henry obviously soaking up a lot there. But I'm not ready to totally give up on him yet. He's probably a guy I'm stashing at the end of my bench, and if I end up needing a roster spot, I'll turn him. I'll get rid of him closer to the season. Khalil Herbert for me at 66. He's probably in that journeyman second or third running back that just sees few snaps. It's going to be hard for me to see him as consistent fantasy.
36 snaps.
Well, and they were so impactful, I don't even remember he saw the field at all. Maybe he'll be better. He was coming back from a pretty major injury too. Mm-hmm. We didn't expect to see a lot from him in 25. Or 24. It's just a question of whether there's enough snaps for him. 65 for me, Kamani Vidal. Chargers are another team. Their running back room, a question. J.K. Dobbins is a free agent. Gus Edwards still under contract. Kamani Vidal, year 2, coming in. We didn't see a ton to make you real excited about him as a rookie, but we'll see if he can pick it up or find a bigger role. 64 for me. I also have Will Shipley here. I think he's probably going to end up being more of the backup to Saquon Barkley, but as we saw, that doesn't always give you a whole lot of work or snaps. 63, another guy that's probably a big question for me, and that's Elijah Mitchell. If he is healthy and signs in the right situation, this could be way too low, but he's going into free agency having not really given you much to get excited about the last 2 years. Definitely has struggled with injuries throughout his run to stay on the field. He remains a big unknown with some potential upside for me. 62, I have Antonio Gibson. I think he's fine. He'll be something of a contributor, probably still to that Patriots backfield, but he did not do a lot last year, and I don't think he's a huge part of what they're going to do. That was not, with Josh McDaniels going back to the offense there, we made a lot of jokes about Patriots running backs in the past, but they weren't really jokes. They were just, you have to laugh to keep from crying. You have to laugh so you don't cry. For me, 61, Kenneth Gainwell. He goes into free agency. We saw bits and flashes of him do things with the Eagles. He's a guy that could move up or down for me depending on what happens. Is there a market for him? I thought he was a pretty sturdy contributor throughout his years with the Eagles, but not incredibly impressive. And now we're kind of on the precipice of what happens next. So, Dennis, why don't you give us your top 10 in this group, 60 to 51?
So, again, we have another, the majority of this 10 are veterans that are, that have some value, maybe a number 2 somewhere, may need something to happen in front of them to get enough playing time to be relevant. Or enough playing time to be consistent. First off is Gus Edwards. Gus has a specific thing that he does. He's like the Liam Neeson of running backs. I'm going to hammer it in there. I'm going to get you 6 yards. I'm not going to catch a lot of passes. I'm not going to run away from a lot of people. But if you block the hell out of it, I'm going to run real hard and I'm going to get you 4, 5, 6 yards. And eventually, when the game wears on, I'll get you some bigger chunks. However, I'm not 250 pounds like Derrick Henry, so after a few weeks, I'm going to break down. 59, I got Jaleel McLaughlin. I don't know what to do with that Broncos backfield right now. They got McLaughlin's there. Estime is still there. Williams is a free agent. Who is their 4th guy? Blake Watson. It's, I don't know. It's McLaughlin feels very much like a Jag. Number 58, Ty Johnson. He's the 3rd guy behind Ray Davis and 4th guy behind Ray Davis, James Cook, and Josh Allen. He has some good games. He makes some plays. If something happens to Davis, he moves up the food chain. If something happens to Cook, he moves up the food chain. And he's been productive in spurts, but I don't know that, he can maintain it. 57's Devin Singletary. He got usurped by Tyrone Tracy. I feel like the Giants are probably going to bring somebody else in too. They don't have a ton of faith in Eric Gray to do anything other than return kicks. I think Singletary will be around. They could get out of his contract. He's $6 million in dead cap this year, 1.25 next year. But I think his veteran presence on that team is something Brian Daboll values. So he'll be there for at least this year. 56, I got Kareem Hunt. Again, total wild card. It's going to depend on, does he land somewhere? He's somebody I could see, dropping way out. Again, he might not get signed till week 8. He's a little bit shifty in the hole, but he's not explosive. He hits it hard. He gives it everything he's got. He's an effective blocker. He's an effective pass catcher and good at running routes. There's just no pop there anymore. He was never known for his speed. And when you have a team like Kansas City that has de-invested in their offensive line, it makes it hard on a back like Kareem Hunt. 55, I got Cam Akers. I think he might be under contract for 1 more year in Minnesota. He's a guy that has, started to pop off a little bit. We're 3 years removed from his Achilles injury?
No, it was in 23. Last year was him coming back from his 2nd Achilles injury.
So again, another guy that I don't think has the pop he did at one point. He's always had questionable vision.
I mean, he might have pop in his lower leg because that seems
Right.
to pop off every couple of years.
So, but I could see he's a guy I could see stumbling into a starting role or stumbling into a timeshare, getting 50% of the workload, and putting up okay numbers. 54, Antonio Gibson. Again, this whole section is people that I think need stuff to happen around them to move up past this point. Gibson's a pretty good pass catcher, not great inside runner at all, doesn't have good inside vision. For as big as he is, he doesn't run with much power. Again, another guy I could see dropping 20 spots or raising 10 spots. 53, I got Damian Pierce. He finally seemed to settle into the zone blocking scheme last year, and it seemed like he got it. We'll see what happens with Drew Petzing being replaced, how that changes that scheme, because it was such a good fit for Joe Mixon. Mixon's getting up there, and if he ends up, picking up a nagging injury or even an injury that holds him out some, I could see there being opportunity for Damian Pierce to have a resurgence. 52, Zach Moss. He went out, he kind of lost his job after week 4, but he was RB 18 through the first 4 weeks of the season. Chase Brown came on. Chase Brown's one of these guys. He's not super big. Excuse me. And so he carried a pretty heavy workload after Moss got injured. And there's always that chance that he can't hold up. I think Moss is going to be going to the season. He's going to be the backup to Brown. I don't think he gets probably more than 25% of the work. But, if something happens to Brown, I think Moss slides right back into the starting role he had at the beginning of last year. And then number 51, total crapshoot, Justice Hill. He had some games where he had 8-10 targets and was producing. When they get down, Henry goes to the bench, Justice Hill comes in. And when they have to spell Henry right now, Justice Hill is the guy that does that too. I don't think he's going to get a lot of work, but he will get the receiving work. And I think that's good for both him and Henry. But, 51 feels like probably as good as you could hope for.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. So for me at 60, I have Kendre Miller. I think the best thing going for him is that Dennis Allen is out as coach in New Orleans because he was
hated that dude.
Perpetually in the doghouse. We saw him start to get more run and more activity and get actually activated with Rizzi. Now a different offensive coordinator in there. They obviously still have Alvin Kamara, but Kendre Miller was a 3rd-round pick going into year 3. It's kind of now or never. At 59, I have Marshawn Lloyd. You had talked about him before. I'm not certain that he'll end up always behind Emmanuel Wilson in this season. Obviously, Josh Jacobs, a great workhorse back there, but I think Lloyd was banged up both in the preseason and throughout the season. So, going into year 2, they spent a pick on him. Be curious to see if he can step up. I have Isaiah Davis at 58. I thought he was more of a contributor than I was expecting as a rookie. It's a contract year for Breece Hall. I'm not sure it was all just coming back from injury. That is the reason he did not look good or efficient at times. He'll probably be the lead back there this year, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Jets decide to move on from him after this season. I have Sean Tucker at 57. I liked what we saw in spurts. The question is role and touches and when he'll get on the field. I feel like in this range for me, I have a mixture of young guys that don't have a defined role and some veterans who, as you said, need some things to break right for them. One of those youngish players is 56 for me, Roshan Johnson. We've waited for him to break out and to do some things in Chicago for 2 years. The wait continues. Will he have a bigger role with Ben Johnson? I guess it's possible. I also think it's possible they bring in another running back to pair with DeAndre Swift in Chicago, which could mean that 56 is too optimistic for Roshan Johnson. Number 55, Jalen Wright. We didn't see a huge contribution from him. Is a rookie in Miami, but they let Raheem Mostert go now. Does that open up some more opportunities? Is that Miami offense going to become more functional in 2025? I mean, there's questions about his role for me and his team after last year was kind of a dumpster fire. I have Cam Akers at 54. If 2 Achilles injuries didn't kill him, I don't know what will. He actually sometimes, even in the playoffs, look like a better running back spark plug than even Aaron Jones. So, he's got a bionic leg because a lot of running backs we've talked about, one Achilles kind of just ending it. He blew it twice, including in 2023, and, has still managed to come back and contribute. Minnesota didn't think he was going to be able to contribute and let him go, and he signed and was the third back for the Texans, and they liked what they saw so much they traded to get him back. So kind of tells you a little bit of trajectory. Number 53 for me is those aforementioned Texans, Dameon Pierce. An interesting couple of years for him. He had a year as a rookie where he led that backfield and looked great, and people got really excited that he was a rookie draft pick diamond in the rough. And then his second year when he was splitting at the beginning with Devin Singletary and then lost his job, it just looked rough. And last year when they brought in Joe Mixon, he had hardly any role. But at the end of the year when he got some opportunities, he looked like a very different back and looked very efficient, ran for more than 7 yards a carry and looked somewhat potentially explosive, which gets me excited about him potentially again. 52, I have Zach Moss. I think he's probably entering that, change of pace, spot starter role. I think last year was kind of his chance to seize a starting spot there in Cincinnati. And as you mentioned, he looked okay, but not great, then got hurt. Chase Brown looks a lot better. And then I have 51, Devin Singletary. I think he's almost in the same role. If he was going to he had a pretty great 2023 stepping in and being the running game for the Texans. I thought, no one was going to replace Saquon Barkley in New York, but he had a great opportunity to be a very useful player in fantasy and just couldn't get it going. I think he'll stay because of his familiarity with Dable, but his opportunities are probably going to be limited. Dennis, who is your biggest faller in this group?
So I've got several guys that I was looking at. Obviously, Zach Moss. We were high on him last year. We expected a lot from him. We thought he was going to be the starter. He was the starter. And now I've got him down at 52. That was a pretty big drop. Nick Chubb, again, the starter in Cleveland till he got injured. And, there's just a ton of uncertainty with free agency and his age. And then Devin Singletary. Well, I feel pretty comfortable that, there was a lot of hype around the Giants offseason last year and, the shows. And it's like Singletary was the guy they wanted, and they went out and they got him after they let Barkley go. But I just don't, Tyrone Tracy was just better. So, again, another guy that's dropped down into the 50s. So, well, I think they keep him because he's going to provide some veteran leadership on a team that's going to be going through transition with a new quarterback. Maybe they get lucky and bring in one of the better veterans, which is a weird statement this year. Or maybe they're able to get Ward or Sanders, or who knows, maybe they get Dart or Howard or Ewers and let one of the young guys run with the job. But I think Singletary is pretty far behind Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah, I think those are all good picks for me. I'm going to go back to Jamal Williams because 2022 when he was kind of leading in a backfield, 1,066 rushing yards, 17 rushing touchdowns to lead the league in 2 years. With New Orleans, he has appeared in 27 games. He's rushed for 470 yards and 2 touchdowns total, averaging 3.1 yards per carry. Now he's hitting that 30-year-old age cliff. So I don't see him coming back. But that was kind of, I liked the potential move with New Orleans. We thought maybe it was going to be a Mark Ingram kind of situation coming in there pairing with Alvin Kamara, and we just have never seen anything approaching it. Who is your biggest riser in this group?
Honestly, I didn't really have on anybody that I felt like was a riser. These are guys that are, they're RB3s and RB4s. And if I had to pick somebody that's a riser, maybe Cam Akers at 55, because, it really felt like after the second injury and getting passed around like a party girl that, there wasn't a future for him. And he landed in Minnesota and he made it work and put it together. So I guess I'm going to go with Cam Akers at 55.
Yeah, and Akers a good choice because he wouldn't have been ranked for me at this time last year either, because I thought after a second Achilles that was going to be pretty well it. Another one that I'm going to go with is Sean Tucker, because we were excited the year before when he was coming out and he landed on Tampa Bay's practice squad, but then he could never get onto the field as a rookie. So I didn't have him in my in my top 75 going into last year because it seemed like that window had kind of closed for him. And then he started out buried on the depth chart, got elevated, looked good enough that then they talked about making it a 3-man rotation, which never really materialized. But at least he's got some life left, and if one of those other guys moves on, definitely could have a shot to move up, or like you said, if he gets traded somewhere. Who was the toughest to rank in this group?
Man, this whole slew of veterans that it feels like we may be coming to the end of the road. Moss, Pierce, Gibson, Akers, Hunt, Singletary, Chubb, Edwards. That's why I have so many of them grouped together. It's like it feels like, they're not in a position to be at RB4 or RB3. But I also don't believe they're going to just disappear. And so when we rank 75, it's like I got to put them somewhere. So I'm kind of grouping these guys together in a couple different groups. And most of them have the potential to probably at best be a timeshare back. And it just depends on what situation they end up in. So if they do end up in a good timeshare situation, then these are going to be guys that you're getting really cheap, that you're slotting in as your RB2 or a flex play, that you're getting, in a PPR, you're getting 8 or 10 points a week from.
Who's somebody you had outside the top 75 that was tough, that just missed the cut?
So I'm going to go with 3 guys. 2 of them are Raiders.
Poor Raiders.
Alexander Madison and Zamir White. Again, the Raiders, we know what Mark Davis does. We know how Mark Davis does it. But from everything we're hearing, Tom Brady is putting his stamp on how this team operates. And by and large, we all respect Tom Brady as not a loser. So I think we're expecting, some Belichickian shit to happen from the front office with Tom Brady. Now, they bring in Pete Carroll. It'll be interesting to see that dynamic between Carroll and Brady. And then the guy they brought in between them, who's Brady's old college teammate, that's the actual GM. I forget his name. But that'll be kind of interesting to watch. But that team has like 3 or 4 really, really good to great players, and then they need an overhaul just about everywhere else. The other guy that I had that just missed was Khalil Herbert.
The Raiders GM is John Spytek.
Yeah.
I don't. Was
I
he
think
a
he was
player?
a college teammate of Brady.
Okay.
So Khalil Herbert, I liked him in Chicago and he popped off. Again, another guy that can't stay healthy. He broke off some big runs in Chicago. Cincinnati acquired him after Moss got injured, and they didn't use him very much. He did start to earn more playing time as the weeks went on. He's a guy that I could see being, a top 60 back, but I tended to err on the side of younger players. I probably have a lot more first or second year players in my rankings at the back end.
And you're right. They were college teammates. So who in this group, 75 to 51, if things broke incredibly right, could finish top 25?
Well, the aforementioned Zach Moss, he showed up in a lot of these categories. Like if Chase Brown gets injured and something happens, Cincinnati, they're a throw first team, but they also, they can get ahead. They can grind it out. Moss is, 5'11", 220. He's a big back, can carry a workload, decent enough pass catcher. His career hasn't went like a lot of analysts thought it would go. Dameon Pierce, if something happens to Joe Mixon, if the new offense is geared more towards man blocking, which Pierce has always excelled in, or if the new offense continues to be zone blocking, and we saw Pierce as the season went on last year when he got opportunities, he showed himself to be a lot more effective in that excuse me, in the zone blocking. So I could see him I don't think he'd get the workload that Mixon did. I think that we'd see a little bit more Dario Gumbawale paired with Dameon Pierce. And lastly, I think Sincere McCormick, if the Raiders go, look, we're going to just piece this backfield together. We're not going to invest draft picks on running backs because we think they're disposable. So we're going to piece it together. This guy flashed last year. Let's give him an opportunity to be the 1A. And whether that's paired with Madison or Abdullah or some other pass-oriented catching back, we shall see. But I think McCormick's a guy that I could see with the workload. We see Jags with workload have good fantasy seasons. If he was going to get the workload and he's got the size, he could handle the workload, he could finish as a top 30 back. A good guy to stash on the end of your bench.
Yeah, the one I'm going to go with is Elijah Mitchell. I think if he goes to the right situation and he is healthy enough to return, we saw him in 2021 when he was a rookie, pretty well leading that San Francisco backfield. He finished as RB 26, and that was with missing 6 games. He was putting up some good numbers. He looked pretty good. I think in this range, if you're hoping somebody can hit, you're kind of looking for either a veteran that's in a good backup situation or a lottery pick. And to me, if you still are holding Elijah Mitchell, he's a lottery ticket right now. You're waiting to see if there's a team out there that's going to give him a good contract and let him try to lead their backfield. And I think there's probably some desperate teams.
There is, and while I like Elijah Mitchell when he's on, he's one of those backs that falls into this archetype for me that just scare me. He's 5'10" and 200 pounds, and we see those guys when they get a big workload, they break. Now, so far, Kyron Williams has held up. But, if I'm in the Kyron Williams business, I might be looking to move him this offseason after the last 2 years, especially watching how his receiving work diminished so greatly last season.
Might come back with no Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, but they'll have Emeka Ibuka.
That'll do it for us today. We will be back on Tuesday looking at another chunk of running back rankings, number 50 to 26. And then we will finish up running backs next Friday. Dennis, if people have a lot of free time on their hands and, if you're on the East Coast, you're probably getting the cold weather that we've had all week, and you're welcome. What might I want to do?
Well, they can do what we do and go to your favorite podcast platform, hit the search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, give us a subscribe, give us a like, download. You don't have to listen, just download. Let us have that number.
Well, we will see you guys on Tuesday talking more running backs. We'll see what other kind of fun news can get ready to pop off, and the combine right around the corner. But until then, you guys have a wonderful weekend.